Welcome to SwagTips. If you're unaware, on April 2nd, Giratina is going to be transforming into its Origin Form. The big, tall, thick, strong boy you know right now, that's actually the altered form of Giratina. And the Origin Form is this long, snaky looking boy. So what's cool about this form change is the attack stat and defense stat of Giratina flips, and we also get some move pool changes. As far as the move pool changes go, we retain Shadow Claw, but we now have Dragon Tail, Dragon Pulse, Ominous Wind, and most importantly, Shadow Ball. With Shadow Ball and the attack stat improvement, Giratina Origin Form is arguably the strongest Ghost-type Pokemon in all of Pokemon Go, for generations to come even. So in this video, I'm going to be going over how to best counter the Origin Form raid and just how good Giratina Origin Form is in the Pokemon Go meta, covering both raid content and trainer battles. So if you're new to SwagTips, this is a graph of the Giratina-O raid using Go Battle Sim, which is on GamePress, link in the description, using level 4 counters against a tier 5 Giratina Origin Form raid using all of Giratina's movesets averaged, with no dodging and best friendship. The performance are rated by the damage per second, so how fast you're dealing damage, which is the y-axis here, and the total damage output, which is the average amount of damage your Pokemon's going to put out before it gets fainted by Giratina Origin Form, which is the x-axis. As such, Pokemon that are more up and more to the right are going to be better performers for this raid. Now, while this is using primarily level 40 counters, there are other levels featured for some key Pokemon, and those represent breakpoints. So levels of significance, where if you have a 15 IV attack stat, you get an extra level of damage in for your Pokemon. If you want to know the specific breakpoints for your specific Pokemon, if they don't have perfect IVs or something like that, or at least a 15 IV attack, link in the description to a breakpoint calculator. So overall, the best counters to the Giratina Origin Form raid are going to be the same counters for the Giratina Altered Form raid. I mean, they're both Dragon Ghost type Pokemon with relatively similar move pools, right? So yeah, Rayquaza and Dialga, the bread and butter of this fight. Now, one important thing I do want to highlight to you guys is the power of Dragonite here. As you can tell, with its level 35 breakpoint, if you're dealing with under-leveled Rayquazas and Dialgas, Dragonite may be as good, if not better than them. So definitely don't sleep on your outraged Dragonites there. There are other good options for this fight if you're not stocked up on dragons. For example, you got Mamoswine, you got Weavile. Cute note on Weavile, Night Slash with Avalanche is its best moveset for this particular raid. And I feel like Tyranitar is also a really nice option. It doesn't have the duo tier DPS going on, but if you're just fighting with a bunch of friends, Tyranitar definitely is serviceable for this battle. If you got a Palkia already powered up, that's also a really good counter. I don't exactly advise powering up a Palkia though, because compared to the other dragon types in the game, it's a little bit less useful, but if you already got one, you may as well use it, right? And Giratina-O itself is also a very potent counter. Salamence as well. If you are aware, there is the April 16th Bagon Community Day. And if Salamence gets Outrage for its Community Day, not confirmed, but it'd actually just be like a little bit behind Rayquaza. The one featured here is using Draco Meteor. And as such, I don't have breakpoints for it listed out here because Draco Meteor makes it less consistent and therefore inferior to like Dragonite, for example. And of course, Shadow Ball Mewtwo, Ice Beam Mewtwo, there's a difference between them. Shadow Ball's a bit better, but both of them pretty good options for this fight. And Latios, he's okay too, but just like Palkia over here, a little bit less useful than the other dragon types. Important thing I want to note for you if you are into the DPS or you are a Gengar enthusiast, Gengar isn't exactly the best option for this fight. Yeah, you can see over here, not very tanky and not very good DPS. And we all know that Gengar is supposed to be like the high DPS ghost type option. What's going on here? Well, the problem is that all of Giratina's moves are multi-bar charge moves, which means it can whip them out at any time in the fight, more or less, aside from the very beginning. Yeah, so here I have the lead-only peak DPS for Gengar. So lead slot, first Pokemon at the very beginning of the battle. Gengar will have the most potential to consistently get off Shadow Balls, and as such, if you are going to use Gengar for the fight, well, that's the only place I feel you should be using it. If you use Gengar anywhere else, well, it's probably going to get wasted by a random Ominous Wind or Shadow Ball or even Dragon Pulse, just because it's so fragile. And if you are curious, Lick is superior to Shadow Claw in this particular raid, mostly by virtue of it allowing for more consistent Shadow Ball uses. It has the higher energy gains, so therefore you're getting Shadow Ball a little bit more often than you would with Shadow Claw, which is apparently significant on average for this fight. If you're sitting at home thinking, Ryan Swag, I don't have many counters that are above this duo DPS line, are my Pokemon bad? Well, the short answer is yes, but the more long answer is, while they are going to be inferior to the more superior options, you may as well use them, and they can easily contribute to battle. Even Ursaring with Shadow Claw and Play Rough does really well in this fight. So anything that's getting an effective hit on Giratina-O definitely should not be counted out if you're just trying to get these battles done with your friends in the community. Now, while DPS is usually favored over TDO, I do want to give a special shout out to my boy Snorlax over here. While it doesn't have the duo tier DPS, it is superbly tanky in this fight, being a normal type Pokemon. Giratina-O has 2 ghost type charge moves. This guy does not care about those ghost type charge moves. It actually lasts in most battles over 50 seconds, which is pretty profound, to be honest. So if you're the type of player that doesn't like to re-lobby, you just want to stick with one team, get the fight done, and get on with your life, then including one powerful outraged Snorlax at the end of your party might be a good way to just stay into the fight until the bitter end. Overall, the fight's pretty easy. You should get it done. It's easier than the altered form because you have that lower defense stat, and it also has a greater focus on the ghost type damage, so the dragon types don't have to worry about Dragon Claws slapping them down or Ancient Power slapping them down. Not like Dialga cares, but, you know, the Dragon Flying types, they kind of care about Ancient Power. If you want some extra details on countering the Giratina Origin Form, you can definitely check out our guide on GamePress. Link in the description to that if you want to get some extra details in. But now that we're done talking about how to counter this guy, pretty easy, just how good is it in PvP and the raid battle meta? So this is a simple table generated from GamePress's DPS TDO spreadsheet showing the best Ghost and Dark type attackers in Pokemon Go. Now I'm using Ghost and Dark type Pokemon because Ghost and Dark basically have the same exact coverage, so these Pokemon will be fulfilling very similar roles in the meta. One Pokemon that's featured here that isn't released yet but is expected to come out eventually because it's a Gen 4 Pokemon is Darkrai here. Darkrai is a Dark type Pokemon. It is like the Nightmare Pokemon where Cresselia is like the Dream Pokemon. Darkrai is a Mythic Pokemon though, so it's a little bit big question mark when we're going to get to see it, but we do know what its move pool is and we do know what its stats are, so I decided to throw Darkrai on here anyways. So yeah, as you can tell, Giratina, really freaking good. It doesn't have the DPS of Gengar here. You can see this is the DPS, but it is spooky thick, and the clap of its Shadow Balls gives it a total damage output that is nearly twice that of Gengar, establishing it as one of the greatest ghost type attackers in the game. My face is kind of covering up this column here a little bit, but this is DPS to the power 3 times TDO, so damage per second, your attacking speed basically, times the total damage output, so the total amount of damage your Pokemon's expected to do on average throughout the fight. You can think of it as a more useful metric of tankiness. We'll give them this ratio, created by the genius bioweapon, who is smarter than all of us about these things. It shows that the combination of its damage per second and tankiness makes it the greatest ghost type attacker. So that's pretty exciting. Darkrai is a bit close for a second here, so if it were to get a better charge move than Shadow Ball, such as Foul Play, maybe it might tick up a little bit, but it doesn't really seem like there's much competition beyond that. In fact, taking a peek ahead at the Pokemon Go universe, it doesn't appear that Giratina is going to have much competition as a Ghost type Pokemon or a Dark type Pokemon, same coverage, until at least Gen 6 with Eviltail. Eviltail, legendary Pokemon, and that's also contingent on if Eviltail gets the right moveset. If Palkia, Dialga, and Heatran are any indication, it's not exactly guaranteed that legendary Pokemon are going to get the moves they want exactly, right? So Giratina could easily be top dog for generations to come. There is also Mega Evolutions to consider, but because I don't know how Pokemon Go is going to implement Megas or what mechanics might revolve around that, we're just going to keep that idea on the shelf until a time comes, right? So Giratina, looking like a pretty hot investment. That said, if you already have a bunch of Gengars, Mewtwo's, and Tyranitar's already powered up, then Giratina might not be the best investment for you. Being the best is great and all, but having extra Stardust to power up other things you might need because you already got your Dark and Ghost type damage on lock might be better for you. But, as I said, being the best is being the best. And Giratina is looking pretty hot up here, right? So I feel like at least powering up just one might be a good idea. Another reason why you might want to max out a Origin Form Giratina is because of its performance in the Master League. If you're unaware, Giratina Altered Form is already one of the topmost Pokemon in trainer battles for the Master League. Yeah, and the Origin Form is arguably a bit better. Main reason is that it has Shadow Ball. Shadow Ball is just that good. So the way the Altered Form functions right now is that it's got the powerful fast move Dragon Breath. It also has the high energy gaining fast move Shadow Claw. It also has the early activating Dragon Claw, and it's got Ancient Power, which is good for coverage and can also give it the boosting effect. If you're not aware, Ancient Power has a 10% chance to boost your stats. If you don't already know about those details, you can learn about those details in another video. And then just in case, it also has Shadow Sneak to have that alternative coverage. If everybody's getting complacent with, Dragon Claw and Ancient Power and how to beat that, maybe they're using Metagross, well, Shadow Sneak will be a nasty surprise for it. So while all of these light, nice, pelting hits are great and all, especially for wasting shields, Giratina Altered Form doesn't really have much killing power. You know where killing power comes from? Shadow Ball. Yeah, Shadow Ball is awesome for that. So what Giratina Origin Form does is it trades all of that coverage, focuses on Ghost type damage, and KOs things a bit more easily because it has Shadow Ball. This makes it arguably better than Giratina Altered Form. So with that in mind, Giratina Origin Form is much more predictable than the Altered Form, and because of that, your opponent may know how to deal with it more easily. That said, they may just know that they're going to lose to the Origin Form because it's so good and Ghost type is relatively unresisted. A cool thing to note about the Origin Form is that the Altered Form's baiting move is Dragon Claw. The Origin Form's baiting move is Ominous Wind. So it's most optimal for you to bait shields using Ominous Wind. And if you are aware, Ominous Wind is a stat boosting move, so you have a 10% chance to just get crazy. One notable matchup where this may come in handy is against Dialga. You throw out that Ominous Wind and you get that stat boost, you're turning a narrow loss into an absolute victory. So I think that's pretty tight for Giratina Origin Form there. When it comes to the Altered Form, you're basically relying on your opponent having less shields than you or something to maybe overcome the battle, but things aren't looking too good for the Giratinas either way. So 10% chance to maybe win or 100% chance to absolutely lose. You take your pick. The main thing that you have to be aware of, though, is against something like Snorlax. I think it's almost exclusively Snorlax. You're going to have some big problems because you're really not going to get a unresisted hit on that guy. And another problem that opens up for Giratina Origin Form is Dragonite. While Dragon Breath, Dragon Claw, Dragonite isn't super common in the Master League because of, the ability to obtain it, it's still a really potent, powerful Dragon-type Pokemon. And because Giratina Origin Form doesn't really have a good Dragon-type hit to retaliate with, Dragonite kind of dominates the fight a little bit. You could carry Dragon Pulse, but Dragon Pulse is just so poor, especially in comparison to what you could get out of Ominous Wind. I don't really think it's advisable just to prepare for the Dragonite matchup. And it definitely isn't going to help you in the Snorlax matchup, so don't even sweat it. Yeah. So big takeaway, Master League, Giratina Origin Form, really hot. Shadow Ball, murders things. Watch out for Snorlax. Watch out for Dragonite. Hey, you might not lose to Dialga now. Now moving on down to the Ultra League. As you may be aware, even though I haven't done a 101 guide on it yet, Giratina Altered Form is the king of the Ultra League. So if Giratina Origin Form is slightly better than it in the Master League, one would assume that it would be slightly better in the Ultra League. Problem though, is the Ultra League has a big limitation for Giratina Origin Form, and that is the CP cap. So 3 factors that make Pokemon good in PvP is their base stat total, their move pool, and their resistances. When it comes to these 2 Giratinas, they have the same base stat total, the same BST, in the Master League. Their attack and their defense is just flip-flopped. one isn't better than the other, they're equal. And because it's in the Master League, they are absolutely equal. The thing that makes Giratina Origin Form slightly better is that it has a arguably better move pool, right? Well, when you drop down to the Ultra League, you have the CP cap. And because the CP formula favors the attack stat more, so higher attack stat Pokemon have higher CP, well, that negatively impacts it when you're capped. And as a result, it has significantly less stats than the Altered Form does in the Ultra League. Now, truth be told, the Origin Form doesn't look to be too shabby in the Ultra League. You can use it to great success, but it does have the deck stacked against it. Not only does it have lower base stats than the Altered Form, but because Giratina is such a dominant presence in the Ultra League, like the entire Ultra League, if you're playing at like a high-end competitive Supreme level, is completely based around countering and using Giratina. As such, Giratina Altered Form's wider coverage makes it a bit less predictable. When you have the Origin Form, it is absolutely predictable. And because the whole meta is geared up to beat down on Giratina to begin with, this lower base stat total version of itself, limited to only ghost type damage, is gonna have a rougher time. I don't think that's gonna be too big of a deal for most players though, because if you get a really good Origin Form Giratina, you're probably just going to max it out anyways, because it is arguably the best ghost type in all of Pokemon Go that we have for generations to come. So yeah, nothing really too lost there, right? And of course, trainer battles, I feel like those are mostly focused on the Great League, and both these boys are too big for the Great League, so nothing to worry about there for a while, right? So now you guys are informed of Giratina Origin Form. The raid fight is going to be a bit easier than the Altered Form because it has the lower defense stat, and you're basically going to use the same counters as you always have, so nothing too crazy there. And then as far as the Origin Form in the meta goes, for raid battles, because it has Shadow Ball now, Giratina is arguably the greatest ghost type / dark type, because same coverage. I don't think Giratina is a dark type like Niantic does. But yeah, it's going to be one of the best attackers in the game for generations to come, so you may as well catch a good one and power it up. And if you need any more reason to power up a Giratina Origin Form, it does perform quite well in the Master League. And I guess isn't too shabby in the Ultra League either, but the Altered Form, a little bit better in the Ultra League. Actually, maybe a lot better, depending on how you look at it. Yeah. So if you got any questions on Giratina Origin Form, or maybe some questions about the Altered Form, comment below, let me know what's up, and I'll be happy to help you out. If you like this content, you want to see more like it, well, you probably already subscribed already. Let's be real here. SwagTips. Have you guys know, I'm very proud of myself for the spooky thick line. That's like my favorite joke crafted. It's actually in the GamePress article. Unless they make me take it out. I don't know why they would. They're kind of meme lords at GamePress there.